my name is Vista Beasley, and once upon a time I was a distance runner on my university's athletics and cross-country team. And at that time my goal was to be an Olympic marathoner. But the fact that I am not standing on a podium with my neck draped in medals, and instead I'm standing in front of you today whining about that fact, means that it didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen is because I ended up having a series of chronic injuries that ended my running career. So this is why I've become very interested in the study of chronic injury, and it's what's led to the research proposal that I'm going to present today on the psychological antecedents of chronic injury, in which I believe that self-presentational concern and mental toughness may be involved. So first I'll tell you the results of a literature review that I conducted and how I arrived at my research question and my hypothesis. And then I'll tell you about the methods that I'm proposing to use in order to test this hypothesis. So first I went and looked at the prior research that has been done on chronic injury. And it turns out that the physical causes are quite well known. Basically, if you train too hard, or you train too much, or particularly if you have a kind of a small nagging pain and you keep training too hard and too much instead of reducing your workload, well, you might end up with chronic injury. But I was more interested in why we train too hard and why we train too much. Why, when that knee starts becoming a bum knee, yet keep training and end up hurting it worse and then possibly ending your career. And that's getting at the psychological antecedents. And so it turns out when I did my literature review that this has been studied hardly at all. So there's this big gap in literature, which I am hoping to fill. So I had to start looking into what might fill that gap, and I started thinking of my own experience, and I believe it had something to do with the fact that when you work really hard, other people are impressed. And when you have that little sore knee, but man, you just suck it up and you get out there and you do your work, well, people are impressed. And particularly on my team, I believe that in a lot of instances we were trying to impress our coach. And so I thought there was something to this trying to impress others that might be related to chronic injury. Well, I went and talked to my professor about these ideas, and it turns out there's a fancy academic word for this trying to impress others, and it's called self-presentational concern, where basically you're trying to present yourself in such a way that other people will view you the way you want to be viewed. So then I had to do a literature review on self-presentation. And one of the things that I found that was quite related to what I'm looking at is this model by Leary and Kowalski. And some of the components were very related. One, for example, is called publicity, and that's been highly associated with effort. And you can kind of see this in a common scenario when basically suppose you're at practice and coach isn't watching. Well, some of your teammates tend to slack off a little. But as soon as he turns around and starts watching, now they're working really hard, and sometimes too hard. So another element in the self-presentation model is dependency. And basically, if you think about when you try to, you have a goal. Suppose you want to get selected for a high-level team. Well, you may depend on your coach being impressed with you for him to choose to select you. And so you might work harder because you're depending on him. And so another element of the self-presentation model is target's values. The target being who you want to impress, so perhaps the coach. And the values, there are a full range of them. So studies have shown, for example, that if you think that somebody's impressed by you being thin, you might go out and exercise too much. Likewise, you might eat too much and then throw up or eat too little. But basically, you have these extreme behaviors in order to meet that target's value of thinness. Similarly, if you think that the guy over there that you think's a cutie, that perhaps he doesn't like pale skin and thinks it looks sickly, well, maybe you're going to jump in a tanning booth and tan too much, even though you know that might cause cancer. But you're more focused on trying to impress him and meet his values. So this seemed to me, this prior research seemed very related to looking at excessive behaviors, such as excessive training too much despite nagging pains. So I had to look at what target values might be related, and I thought that mental toughness might be. So I went and did a literature review on mental toughness, and it does turn out that 75% of the coaches that have gone to sports psychology consultants have said that the one thing they really want to develop in their athletes is mental toughness, so they seem to value it highly. So as you can see, this is how I conducted my literature review and started honing in on my research question, in which I believe that when you increase dependency and increase publicity and you have a target's value of mental toughness, you should see people doing something excessive in order to show that they have mental toughness. Now I want to be careful in my study and not have people get injured. So I don't want to cause one to go out and run 7 miles when they should have only run 4, and now they're getting injured. So I needed to look at something that wouldn't get them injured. And I'm suggesting that I use mental toughness questionnaire. And the idea being, and this is my hypothesis, is that if publicity and dependency are low, then when their mental toughness is being measured via a questionnaire, they're probably going to have moderate answers, like, yeah, I have some mental toughness. But when their publicity and dependency is high, and they know their coach's values mental toughness, and they need to impress him, suddenly they might be marking more extreme answers. Yes, coach, look at me, I'm a 7 in mental toughness, because that's raised their self-presentation concern. So that's my hypothesis, that when you increase their self-presentation concern, you should see a significantly higher score on the mental toughness questionnaire. And so the way I'm going to test this hypothesis is I'm going to recruit distance runners as my participants. And it's not just because distance running happens to be the finest sport on earth, it's also because these people tend to have a higher chronic injury rate than some other sports. So that makes them definitely having the characteristics that I need for this study. I'm also going to make sure that they are members of a university team. And the reason for this is because I'm going to use targets value as a variable. Well, I need them to have a standardized target. So it's not just, well, impress your mom or impress your boyfriend. The target that the members of a university team would share is a coach. And in America, most teams do have coaches. Then I'm going to use an experimental design, which will be 2 groups. One, of course, is the control group, and the other group I'm calling the high group, because I'm going to make their self-presentation concern, their publicity and dependency, be higher. In order to recruit these participants, I'm going to contact the coaches of university athletics and cross-country teams and ask them to meet with their team. And during that meeting, I'll ask if they'll participate in my research project, and if they agree, I'll give them an informed consent form. Then I'll give them a packet of questionnaires, which will contain my measures. And one will be a demographic questionnaire, in which I'll answer questions about their age, their gender, and their ability, in which they'll report their fastest times in various distance events. Then they'll receive a script. So the control group script is going to be different. It's just going to be them reading about the history of the sport. But the high group script is going to be a little different. It's going to contain a scenario. And they have to imagine that they want to get selected for a higher level competition. And it's come down to you and one other teammate. And all season long, you've both been running kind of the same times, so coach can't pick you based on who's faster. So he's decided that the one with the most mental toughness is going to be the most likely to handle that higher level competition, the pressure of it, handle it better. So he wants to know which one of you has more mental toughness. So he's going to give you some questions. And after you're done answering them, he's going to look at your answers to your question and make his decision. So those are the 2 scripts. When everybody's done reading their scripts, they're then going to answer some questions. Well, these questions happen to be making up the Sport Mental Toughness Questionnaire, the SMTQ. And it has 14 items, 3 subscales: confidence, constancy, and control. When they're done answering these questions, they'll answer a few more questions. And the only way they can get the questions right on these, or the answers right on these, is that they had to have read the script. So this is a manipulation check to make sure that they actually read the script. So once I've collected the sports mental toughness questionnaires, I'm going to sum up each person's score, and then I'm going to get the mean score of each group. So if my hypothesis is correct, then we should see that the mean score of the high group is significantly higher than the mean score of the control group. And the way I'm going to test this is I'm going to use a statistical analysis called the t-test. And that should let me know if they're significantly high or not, as I hypothesize, or whether or not they're not really different, as the null hypothesis suggests. And that will be using a t-test. Finally, I needed to propose how many people I want to recruit for my study. In the psychological sciences, we use a software program called G-Power, which the website's here, you can download it. And this program allows us to enter the statistical analysis we want to use, the t-test, and the number of groups, 2, and then gives you a suggested minimum number of participants, which in this case was 34. But that's a minimum. I want a cushion. So I'm actually going to recruit 52 distance runners to participate in my study and assign 26 per group. So that's how I've arrived at the research question that I have and how I propose to answer it. And so at this time, I would really appreciate any suggestions you can give me on how to improve this research project, and I also welcome any questions. Thank you.